Hi everybody, this is Steve Hogger. Today is Wednesday, April the 14th, and today is Wednesday in the Word. We're continuing through the Sermon on the Mount. We're in Matthew chapter 7 today. We're going to just kind of walk through the first 6 verses of Matthew 7, and we're going to talk about judging or criticizing, something that happens a lot. And you think about the word judge, it basically means to, you think of a judge in our today society as someone who passes sentence on someone who makes a decision, someone who critiques. And this is what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 7. We're going to walk through it. Let's look at verse 1 to start out. Jesus says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged." Jesus is talking to us, but he's talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the religious people of that day. He says, you're not the final court. You're not the final say. You don't make decisions. You don't critique other people. You don't play the role of God. That is not your job. In fact, Paul says in Romans 14, he says, who are you to judge someone else's servant? Who are you and who am I that I could pass judgment on someone, what they think and what they do? It's not my job. I'm not the one that calls the shots on that. There's one that's greater than I am, and that is God. That is Jesus Christ. He's the one that is the final judge, final authority. All right, in verse 2, it says, "For in the same way you judge others, and you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Excuse me. So he says, the same way you judge others, you will be judged. Now, many of you understand what a boomerang is, that you throw the boomerang and it's supposed to come back to you. I've never had luck with that. But if you can do it right, you throw it and it comes back to you. That's kind of what Jesus says here. If you're going to judge, it's going to boomerang back at you. It ain't going to be pleasant. Probably knock you in the head. It ain't going to be good. In the same way you judged, you will be judged. It'll be back to you. The same measure that you use, that same measure will come back to you. It's harder to think about this. It is more harder to judge than to be judged, because if you're the judge, you're going to get the same sentence back to you. Let me do it this way. I read a story this past week about a Persian judge several hundred years ago. This Persian judge took a bribe, and so he sentenced someone, falsely accused someone because he took a bribe. Well, the king heard about that, and I forgot the king's name, but the king executed that judge and had his skin put on the judgment seat. So all the other judges that sat in that seat realized the seriousness of them making a judgment, making the call on other people's lives. Verse 3 in Matthew chapter 7. I'm going to read verse 3, 4, and 5. It says, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own? Why do you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when all the time there's a plank in your own eye?" Then verse 5, "You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and you then will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." Now, real quickly, you understand what he's saying. He says, why do you worry about the little speck, the little dust in your brother's eye, when there's a huge log, huge telephone pole in your eye? We understand that the small and the great, we understand that. It's very simple. He said, why do you sit there and you critique the small stuff that your brother does, how they act? You're nitpicking about that, but you never see the big stuff in your own life. I mean, how can you say, Jesus said, how can you say, let me take that little thing out of your own eye, when there's a huge, glaring log telephone pole in your own eye? It's kind of a funny thing. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we wouldn't want a doctor being blindfolded and operating on us. We want that. We know the doctor can't judge correctly, can't do the surgery correctly. How in the world when we have our own sin in our own lives and our own telephone poles in our eyes, how in the world could we even come close of judging someone else? Verse 5, he says, you hypocrite, you actor, you person who are playing a character. First take the plank out of your own eye. Get that telephone pole out of your own eye. Then you'll be able to see a little clearer to help your brother out. And guys, here's the issue. It is so easy for us to judge. When we judge others, we elevate ourselves and we put others down. Make ourselves look good. Because when we judge someone, our brother in the pew on Sunday, we look at him and say, you know what? That so-and-so's got a problem. I don't have that problem. So therefore, I'm better than that person. And that elevates me a little higher. And it pushes them down a little lower. Judging is so easy. Judging makes ourselves look better than we really are. And what is so sad is we don't even see the telephone pole in our own eyes or in our own lives. All right, verse 6. Verse 6 is kind of a strange verse, and I want to try to cover it here. It says, do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may be trampled them under their feet and then turn and tear you to pieces. Now, to understand this passage, first you got to kind of get out of your mind our society today. You got to go back in Jesus' day. One, dogs in Jesus' day were not house pets. They wasn't. You didn't have Rover sitting at you at night, fetching your slippers, all that kind of stuff. Rover wasn't that way. Rover was a wild scavenger, diseased mutt. They didn't have really pets back then. They may have had a few dogs that helped, herd sheep and stuff like that. But most of the dogs were wild. They were diseased. They were scavengers. They were mean suckers, okay? They'll turn on you in a heartbeat. And so what Jesus says, do not give dogs what is sacred. You wouldn't give a dog something that is holy. You wouldn't, that day going to sacrifice animal, you wouldn't take that meat, sacrifice that meat. The priest got some of the meat. The family that sacrificed got some of the meat. You wouldn't take that meat off the altar that was going to give to God, to sacrifice to God. You wouldn't take that and throw that to the dog. There's no way you do that because that dog is mean and it is wild. You wouldn't do that. Same way, do not throw your pearls to pigs. Pigs wasn't something really nice. I mean, we all love pork today. I love good pork tenderloin. I love barbecue. Love that stuff. But at that day, pigs were considered unholy, unclean animals. I mean, Jews would go on the opposite side of the room if you had a pork sandwich, okay? Nothing. Did not deal with anything pigs. And not only that, the pigs they're talking about here, they were considered wild. They were like wild boars, tearing up everything. And they'll turn on you in a heartbeat. So you take things that are wild, dogs. You take things that are wild, like swine. And you wouldn't give them something that is holy. You wouldn't give them something that is precious, like pearls. You wouldn't do that. So these ungodly things that Jesus is talking about, the pigs and the wild dogs, they wouldn't take anything that was holy or anything that was precious, like the gospel, anything from God. Now think about this. Jesus talks about it in the Gospels. There's going to be a time when my people are going to come and they're going to share the gospel. And people are going to turn on them. They turned on the prophets. They didn't take the message very well. There's going to be times when you share the gospel with someone. They're not going to like it. They're not going to take it. They're not going to accept it very well. In fact, they may even turn on you and trample you. They may persecute you, much like wild dogs and wild swine would do. They don't think anything, they don't think the gospel is precious, and they may actually come after you. So Jesus says, don't judge. Quit judging people. And you need to realize that things that are sacred, that the preciousness of the gospel, some people won't take it. Some people won't take the word and accept it. Instead, they'll turn on you. Verse 6 is kind of weird right there, but I want to kind of add it there. It doesn't really go with it, but I want you to kind of understand that verse. So I hope you got something today. Hope you learned something. And hope you have a great week. Talk to you later.